The more you try to tell me I can't criticize Israel, the more likely I am to do it, to focus on exactly what you're doing, right? Like, what are you doing that you're so defensive? You don't own me.
And if you look at the conservative movement, it is dominated by Zionists. Now, here is a video of Charlie Kirk talking with Megyn Kelly, and Kirk is talking about how he received dozens of angry text messages from Israelis, and he describes these Israelis as leaders and stakeholders. And these Israelis were mad. They were absolutely enraged simply because Charlie Kirk invited critics of Israel to his Turning Point USA event. And they were also upset with Charlie Kirk because he had Megyn Kelly come to the event. And the reason why they were upset was because Megyn Kelly said that more than likely Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent.
Do you think there's any intel community involvement in this?
I wouldn't be surprised one bit. I am convinced, based on my own sources and my own reporting on this story, he wasn't one of ours.
So he was an American, which leads basically three options: MI6, Saudi, or Mossad.
Yep.
Which one would you choose?
I guess Mossad, given his connection to Ghislaine Maxwell.
And this really, really upset all of these Israeli, quote, leaders and stakeholders.
But I am sick of being lectured on, like, you have to see it exactly as we see it and support everything, or you're against us.
So this is so important, Megyn. And again, I don't want, you cannot say everyone in the pro-Israel, and I don't say it, acts that way. But I got texts about you, Megyn, saying, why is Megyn like doing the bidding of Hamas? I was like, what are you talking about? Megyn's the best. Like, what? Like, she's amazing. And I said, why are you texting me about Megyn? And I at that point, and so this is what they don't understand. You and I, Megyn, and Tucker is in the same category, and they've tried to go after Tucker.
Yeah.
Is that and the more you attack our moral character, the more we're going to double down in a direction, because 100%. Screw you, I don't do it that way, okay?
Right.
The thing that I think is being lost is, like, on some part of the population, you can scold them into silence, right? Mm-hmm. But if I have any deviation of a purity test, any deviation whatsoever, such as hosting a focus group, right, Megyn, with a bunch of our students that went viral, having Dave Smith or Tucker at my event, it is all of a sudden, oh, Charlie is he's no longer with us and all that. I said, wait a second, what do you mean? What does with us mean exactly? Right? Mm-hmm. I'm an American, okay? Like, I represent this country, and I don't even understand that paradigm. But Megyn, I think you would agree with this. I want to make sure we really zero in on this. Personality types like you, myself, and Tucker, the more that you guys privately and publicly call our character into question, which is not isolated, right? Megyn, it would be one thing if it was one text or two texts. It is dozens of texts.
Yes.
Then we start to say, hold the boat here. And to be fair, some of my really good Jewish friends are like, that's not all of us, it's all, but these are leaders too, though, right? These are stakeholders, right? I'm afraid because, again, I want civilization to win. I want the West to win. I don't want the Islamo-fascist barbarians to storm the gates of Jerusalem. I want the holy sites protected. I believe in the Holy Land. I love that Jesus walked on water there and rose from the dead and preached in the Mount of Beatitudes. Like, I feel the connection to Israel. But at the same time, simultaneously, when the hostile reaction is that now Megyn and Charlie are enemies,
right?
Boy, I'll tell you, like, you're not gonna, I wouldn't say lose, but you will weaken and just basically deflate two of your strongest advocates if that continues.
The more you try to tell me I can't criticize Israel, the more likely I am to do it, to focus on exactly what you're doing, right? Like, what are you doing that you're so defensive? You don't own me. I don't take $1 of money from any Jewish affiliated group. That's never been what my show's model. I take, Cozy Earth is my sponsor. People like Genucel. Those are the people I take. And I probably would feel reluctant to criticize Genucel, which is a great product. So I probably wouldn't do it anyway. My point is simply, I have my honest opinions, which is why I had credibility for the 2 years I've been defending them, right? And I still have that credibility. And I don't need lectures from my friends who are more pro-Israel than I am, or who are just American Jewish people who are concerned about what's happening. I don't need lectures on my coverage, okay? I'll call it like I see it. And you have no right to come on this show and demand a debate with me because I've said something you disagree with. It's my show, and I'll decide the coverage we do here.
So it really goes to show that with the Zionist movement and with the pro-Israel movement / lobby, if you deviate even just by a little bit from the official pro-Israel narrative, you become an enemy. This clip really does demonstrate how these influential and wealthy Zionists pressure the conservative movement to eschew any sort of criticism of Israel. This really demonstrates my entire point. Now, Tucker Carlson recently did an interview with Megyn Kelly in which he talked about how Charlie Kirk's Zionist donors were acting very, very antagonistic and vicious towards Charlie Kirk before he was murdered.
He was one of the only people, I mean, truly one of the only people to go to the president whom he loved. He loved Donald Trump, like personally as well. And I think the president really loved him in a real way. But he was one of the only people to go to the Oval Office and say, sir, I totally understand and think Iran's really bad, but a war with Iran is not, is something that could really hurt our country. I mean, boy, that was an unpopular position. He didn't need to express it. Oh, of course. And he did it again. He didn't have some weird agenda. He wasn't mad at anybody. He was for his country and he was for doing the right and wise and difficult thing. And he said that. He went to the Oval Office to say that. He took massive abuse from his own donors, which is also something that you don't see people. And he loved his donors. It wasn't a hostile thing, but they had a different view. A lot of them, not all, but a lot. And they expressed it to him in a very intense way. I know because he showed me. And he said, look, I understand your perspective. This is my perspective. And we're going to do what we think is the right thing, the wise thing. It was completely sincere. But I cannot overstate the amount of attacks he took privately over this, like absolutely for real. And having lived in Washington most of my life and seen people run nonprofits, I've never met one who was willing, stand up is too strong. He wasn't confrontational, but he would just say, no, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I think this is the right thing. The people we represent, which is mostly young people, they believe this, and I believe it also. It was brave, but loving at the same time. And I'm not sure he made a lot of headway, by the way. I mean, I think he made real enemies in doing that, but his view didn't change. Anyway.
Now, what this shows us is a dark reality that most people don't know about, and that is the donors who are very powerful in the conservative movement. They use their money, they use their wealth to control the people who they are funding. And you can see this clearly in the story of Charlie Kirk. I am quite familiar with this reality. And I will say, not to paint with a broad brush here, but I will say that in the conservative movement, the foundation for the funding of the American conservative movement is Zionist money. There is indeed a kosher mafia. It's a kosher law mafia in the conservative movement. You know how you have Sharia law in the Islamic world? Well, in the American conservative movement, you have Sharia law. And they are bent on power, and they are bent on using money to control American Christians, to toe the line and to comply with the Israeli narrative 100% without even an inch of deviation. They allow really no room for even 1 ounce of criticism of Israel. And people are beginning to notice this reality. And the Charlie Kirk story really is opening a lot of people's eyes to this dark phenomenon. Now, I think that this is going to gradually shift to where the conservative movement is going to be mainly anti-Israel. But still, for decades, the conservative movement in America has been dominated by Zionists. And this is still the case, but I think that it's slowly beginning to end. But the pro-Israel sentiment is still in the movement nonetheless. But let's just talk about Zionist control or Zionist influence in the American conservative movement. So I remember years and years ago, back in 2013, our website, shoebot.com, was getting massive funds from these Zionist billionaires, or really billionaire. They were a couple. The husband was the billionaire. But the wife, she was extremely enthusiastic about funding conservative figureheads to make sure that they would be pro-Israel. She would fund people, but the money came with strings attached. So they would say, okay, we really like what you're saying, but we want you to be pro-Israel. And as long as you're pro-Israel and you're not criticizing the gay agenda and you're attacking Islam, then we're going to give you money. And they were giving us around 70 grand or so a year. Now, for them, it's nothing. For everyone else, that's a lot of money. And I remember one time, I just said, you know what? This was back in like 2012 or so. I just said, we got to be talking about the gay agenda. Bottom line. Now, these people had been funding our website for years at this point. And I said, we have to be talking about the gay agenda, because I was tired of seeing how the Sodom agenda was persecuting Christians in America. And the biggest example of this was the Christian bakery story. I think this happened back in Colorado. What happened was that you had this Christian bakery, and these gay activists went to the bakery and they said, hey, we want you to make us a cake. And this Christian bakery said, okay, we can make you a cake. And they said, well, we want you to put on the cake Adam and Steve. You know, they didn't really say Adam and Steve, but they wanted a cake for a gay wedding. And they wanted this Christian baker to put the names of the two men who were getting married on the cake. And the Christian baker said, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry, I can give you guys a cake, but I'm not going to be putting Adam and Steve on the cake. I'm just going to give you guys a cake. So they sued the guy, and the baker had to pay damages, psychological damages and all this bullshit to these Sodom activists. And it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was huge. And there were other examples of this. This was the biggest example, but there were other incidences that were just like this. And I said, we have to be talking about this. So I began to really heavily and enthusiastically and intensely write against the pro-Sodom agenda. This billionaire couple contacted us and they said, hey, what are you guys doing? You guys are talking about the gay agenda. We want you to just support Israel and bash Islam. So they just want people to praise Israel, worship Israel, and bash the Muslims, but don't talk against the gay agenda. Don't criticize the gay agenda. Don't criticize the Sodom movement. And we said, no, we're going to talk against Sodom because we're Christians, and this is what we believe in. You can't use money to try to control us, but they were using money to try to control us. And that was an experience that I had a huge impact on me, because I saw firsthand how these Zionist billionaires, how these Zionist funders use money to control people. And in fact, not too long after this, some years later, Donald Trump was running for president. And I remember Donald Trump was speaking at this event, and it was an event that consisted of just a bunch of Republican Jewish funders. It was just an event where Republican Jewish funders listened to candidates who are running for office. And we all know why these events are organized. They are organized for the sole purpose of having political candidates go before a bunch of Zionist Jewish billionaires so that they can play the sycophant to these billionaires and prove and demonstrate how pro-Israel they are so they can lock in on Zionist money. That's the whole purpose of these events. So Donald Trump goes to this event and he says, listen, I know you guys don't like me. He tells this crowd of Jewish funders, I know you guys don't like me because you can't control me with your money.
You're not going to support me, even though you know I'm the best thing that could ever happen to Israel. And I'll be that. And I know why you're not going to support me. And, you know, you're not going to support me because I don't want your money. You don't want to give me money, okay? But that's okay. You want to control your own politician. That's fine.
And I saw that and I said, he's absolutely right. That's what these people do. They use money to control people. And I saw it firsthand. I saw firsthand how these people try to use money to control us. Now, why do they want people to just praise Israel, bash Islam, but not talk against the pro-Sodom agenda? The answer is very simple. It's because Israel is a sodomite country. It is the most pro-Sodom country on earth. Very pro-Sodom. It's so pro-Sodom that Benjamin Netanyahu will openly praise the pride rallies that take place in Tel Aviv every year. Well, the pride rally didn't take place this year because of Iran, but they want you to not attack or not criticize Sodom. And the reason for this is because they know once you start criticizing Sodom, then what are you going to do when you're confronted with the fact that Israel is extremely on board with the Republic of Sodom? You are then going to criticize Israel. That's the whole thing. So if you start criticizing Sodom, then what are you going to do when you're faced with the fact that Israel is a pro-Sodom country? Well, then you're going to have to criticize Israel, and they can't have that because Sodom is an integral part of Israel. They want you to bash Islam all day because bashing Islam means bashing the Palestinians and supporting Israel. So as long as they can get people to just attack Islam. Now, if you want to criticize Islam and criticize Judaism and Israel, that's totally fine. But they don't want that. They don't want that. They just want you to exclusively attack Islam and exempt Israel from criticism. Because if you are refusing to criticize Israel and you're just bashing Islam, then guess what? You're going to be against the Palestinian cause. And people being against the Palestinian cause is a huge benefit for Israel because that means Israel can just bomb the hell out of Gaza, kill countless people, starve people, shoot at starving Palestinians as they're queuing up for food, use Palestinian civilians as human shields, double tap Gazan hospitals, bomb a building, and then slaughter all of the emergency responders when they come to the bombing site. Israel can do all of that with utter impunity because the American people will just say, well, those Palestinians deserve it because they're a bunch of Muslim terrorists and the Israelis are the civilized ones. And that's why they want people to exclusively just attack Islam and not criticize Israel. Now, there is a very clear example of how pro-Israel money influences politicians who would otherwise be either indifferent or critical of Israel, and that is Valentina Gomez. Valentina Gomez was once very critical of Israel's influence in the United States government.
Israel has influence on both sides of the political aisle in American politics. For that reason, I will never be taking $1 from AIPAC because my allegiance is to the people, to the Constitution, and most importantly, to God. My morals and integrity are not for sale, and I will always put America first.
And then what happened?
I firmly stand with Israel. As part of a military family, we do not want World War III. The United States should take swift actions against the coordinated attacks on Israel. Under President Trump, the world was at peace. Now with Biden, innocent lives are about to be executed because of his weak and corrupt leadership. The United States and Israel will prevail.
She does this whole stunt where she burns the Quran with a flamethrower.
Your daughters will be raped and your sons beheaded unless we stop Islam once and for all. We're done turning the other cheek. Remember, David didn't pray for Goliath. He killed them. America is a Christian nation, so those terrorist Muslims can fuck off to any of the 57 Muslim nations. There is only one true God, and that is the God of Israel.
And then she says, oh, the Muslims are going to rape your daughters, and we have to be like King David when he beheaded Goliath. I'm thinking, are you going to behead people? What are you talking about? And she burns this Quran with a flamethrower, and you see her on Twitter literally begging for AIPAC money. Well, hold on a second. What happened to all of this criticism of AIPAC's influence in the American government? Now all of a sudden you're begging for AIPAC money? That's quite telling. And this is yet another example of how Israel is trying to contain the growing sentiment that is critical of Israel within American politics. Now, it's the same thing with all of the far-right movements in Europe. Israel wants to make sure that it is containing those far-right movements in Europe, be it the Tommy Robinson EDL movement in Great Britain, be it the AFD, be it the right-wing movement of people like Marine Le Pen in France. Israel wants to make sure that those movements are not going to become critical of Israel, because those movements are against the Muslims. They're against Muslim migration or Middle Eastern migration into Europe. And as long as those people are against the Muslims, as long as those people are against the Middle Eastern migrants and they're not criticizing Israel, then Israel is A-okay, because those people are allies. And Israel wants it like this. That whole flag movement in the United Kingdom, that's all just a giant Zionist psyop. It's all just one big Zionist movement, because Tommy Robinson is the face of the British flag movement, and Tommy Robinson is a hardcore Zionist. I have almost no doubt that the guy is backed by Israel, probably through some sort of third party, and I have no doubt that the guy is an asset for Israel, because as long as he is the face of the British right wing, then that means Israel can guarantee that that British patriotic movement or that British nationalist movement is going to be pro-Israel and just anti-Muslim. If they're anti-Muslim, then that means Israel can use them as a proxy. And who funded Tommy Robinson? It was Bob Shillman, the major Zionist funder. And also, let's look at the Netherlands. We see the same sort of situation in the Netherlands with Geert Wilders, who is a major Zionist politician in the Netherlands, in the Dutch parliament. Who funded Geert Wilders? Oh, it just so happens to be the same guy who funded Tommy Robinson, Bob Shillman. And why do you think there are so many people in this flag rally holding Israeli flags? I thought this was about Great Britain. I thought this was about being proud to be British. We're proud British people. Unite the UK. Britain first. I thought this was about Britain first. Why in the hell are there all these Israeli flags in a rally that's supposedly about British nationalism? And why in the hell are there all these Israeli flags in a rally that is organized to protest against foreigners overrunning and or controlling the UK? I thought this was about liberating Britain from foreign control. But yet they have all these Israeli flags everywhere. Why is this? It's very obvious why. It's about containing the nationalist movement in the UK to the point where it's nationalistic enough to where the people will go against Muslims and Middle Eastern immigrants, but it won't be nationalistic enough to where people will go against Israel.
Right, mate, can I ask you a couple questions? What are you doing here today?
What agenda you got?
Agenda? I just wanted to ask why you're waving an Israel flag at a British march.
Ah, so would you wear an Afghanistan flag to the English march?
No.
No. Would you wear a Syrian flag to the English march?
No.
Would you wear a Hamas flag to the English march?
No.
No.
Why are you wearing an Israel flag?
It's deeper than what you're thinking, brother. You're just a young man. The Christian country we call Great Britain and England, we are Christian, yeah?
Israel's a Jewish land, though. Israel, you said Britain's a Christian country, but Israel's a Jewish country, so why have you got the Israel flag? I don't get it.
Oh, I see, right. Because Christianity and Judaism are quite related.
Well, what's this got to do with the Israel flag? I'm confused.
I don't know. No. You're far too complicated for me. I don't really care.
So you don't know why you're waving the Israel flag?
I do know.
Why?
I do know more than you little cunt. I'm waving the Israeli flag. If I had an IDF flag, I would be waving that against Arabs.
The idea is to get people to hate Arabs, to hate Muslims, so that when Israel slaughters Arabs and Muslims, the people in the West, the people in the United Kingdom will say, well, you know, they're just killing Muslims and Arabs, and those people are savages and barbarians. Who cares? Israel is fighting the very barbarian hordes that we are fighting, so their fight is our fight. Another thing to keep in mind is that the pro-Palestine cause is growing by leaps and bounds, and it is already quite popular in the United Kingdom. And Israel fears this. Israel is terrified of the pro-Palestine cause becoming too big, because if it becomes too big, it can actually influence a shift in policy not in Israel's favor. This is what Israel fears. And in fact, Benjamin Netanyahu recently stated that because of Muslim immigration in the West is becoming more and more anti-Israel, and therefore Israel needs to become more self-reliant, because Israel is not going to be able to rely on the Western world. So the Israelis see all of these Arabs and other Middle Eastern people, and they see these Muslims in Europe, and they are influencing the pro-Palestine movement in Europe. Israel sees this as a threat. So what does Israel do? Israel influences the nationalist movements in Europe because they want to direct these movements against the pro-Palestine cause. Because these people already don't like Muslims, they already don't want Middle Eastern people immigrating into Europe, so all Israel has to do is say, well, you guys are fighting the very enemies that we are fighting, so we have to be allies. The Israelis essentially want to use these nationalists as proxies to squash the pro-Palestine cause in Europe. And as long as these Zionist nationalists have enough influence, and as long as they are big enough to influence policy, the Israelis can use them and can rely on them to go against any sort of potential policy that may be not in Israel's favor. There is an example that really demonstrates what I'm talking about. Just look at Douglas Murray, who is a major Zionist, pro-Israel, counter-jihad activist in the United Kingdom. He actually stated that if the military does not stop the pro-Palestine rallies in London, then the people will have to rise up and they will have to put an end to the pro-Palestine demonstrations. And Douglas Murray added, it will be very bloody. Yes, very bloody. If the military doesn't put an end to it, then the people will have to put an end to it, and it will be very, very bloody.
But we shouldn't forget 9/11. Who do we have in our midst now, and what might they do?
Well, we have a crux point, in my view, coming up in the UK on the 11th of November, when there is Muslim groups Palestinian groups, pro-Hamas groups in the UK have announced what they call a 1 million man march in this city on Remembrance Day, on Armistice Day, when they will again defile the cenotaph and the statues of our dead and our war leaders. And I believe that the British people will not take this lying down. I think that the police in the UK have failed by allowing people to march through our streets, past our monuments and holy places, past Westminster Abbey and much more, chanting Allahu Akbar and Jihad, Jihad. The police have protected the people doing that and have tried to arrest anyone who dislikes that.
Is it their fault?
The police? Yeah. Now, is it time to send in the army at some point? Probably yes. But if the army will not be sent in, then the public will have to go in, and the public will have to sort this out themselves. And it'll be very, very brutal. It'll be very brutal because there is no the soul of England, the soul of Britain is about to be trampled on very, very visibly by people who are gleeful in their trampling. And they have defaced and defiled all of our holy places. And I know that the British soul is awakening and stirring with rage.
This is what you call incitement. And what Douglas Murray is doing here is inciting mob violence against a pro-Palestine demonstration. And this guy is a very famous Zionist. He is close to the Israeli government. He gets invited to Israel to do propaganda for Israel. And here he is inciting mob violence against the pro-Palestine movement. So this is a very clear demonstration of Israel's acolytes being proxies for the Israelis against Israel's enemies in the West. My prediction is the nationalist movement in the UK will eventually fragment between Zionist and anti-Zionist, and the nationalist movement will eventually backfire against Israel because enough people are beginning to realize the immensity of Zionist influence in political movements. And so as more and more people begin to notice this phenomenon, more and more people in the UK, more and more people in the nationalist movement in the UK will become anti-Israel, and this whole thing is going to backfire against Israel.
What's the reason you're here today?
Well, of course, the same reason that everyone's here today, to show support for Britain.
Why have you got Israel flag then?
Because for almost 2 years, these rallies, demonstrations that flood the streets with all these masked people that are so violent and nasty and so against Israel.
Behind everything. Yeah.
What do you think about the Israel flags being flown at a Britain protest?
It's like the Palestine flag these days, mate. We're here for this country, yeah? So that is behind everything. That's what people don't know. They're uneducated.
Yeah, they are, innit? Israel's funding all this.
They're uneducated, man. They're behind everything, man. They're behind.
Rally called?
They're behind everything.
That's what it's for, free speech.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In Great Britain, it's got nothing to do with us. That's as bad as flying a Palestine flag.
Exactly.
Right, you tell them that they can't fly other countries' flags in our country, but then you fly that, it's the same thing.
Makes no sense.
No, because they are behind everything, they run this country, right? But we see the people, all these people here now today who've turned out for their own country. They haven't turned out for that flag. People don't understand, they're not educated on what that flag means and what it represents and where it come from. And it was adopted by an agenda, and the agenda is pushed on all us now today. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there are people who do bad things.
Yeah, of course. And the majority of them, have adopted that flag. I hate the Palestine flag, I hate Islam, I'm a Christian, right? But that is worse.
I think you should go to Israel and meet some Jews.
And so that whole thing with the flags, all that stuff, Israel loves it. Israel absolutely loves it. And if they can get some video footage of Muslims being violent or Muslims acting crazy in Europe, Israel loves it even more because all of the pro-Israel X accounts can post those videos on Twitter/X, and they can say, look at how barbaric these Muslims are. This is why we have to support Israel. And that guarantees support for Israel in the right-wing movement. And so if those right-wing movements become critical of Israel, then Israel would be in serious danger, because we all know the history of European right-wing nationalism when it comes to Jews. Back in the 20th century, it was European nationalists who butchered Jews. So the Israelis, they want those European nationalists to be nationalist and racist enough to go against Arabs and Muslims, but not right-wing to the point where they start hating Jews. Because right when they start going against Jews, that means Israel can no longer use them as a proxy. Now you say, Ted, what do you mean by use them as a proxy? I have a theory. I have a theory that Israel wants to use the European far right to slaughter the Muslims in Europe. Because if those right-wingers can take power and establish what would essentially be just modernly packaged or repackaged Nazi governments, and those governments slaughter the foreigners, the migrants, the Muslims, the Arabs, the Syrians, then you would have just an entire white European population that would be pro-Israel. In fact, you can read about Israel doing this exact type of thing in modern day history. Back in the 1980s, the Israeli government backed the nationalist far-right movement in Lebanon known as the Kataib movement or the Lebanese Phalange movement. And the Israelis trained the Kataib, they armed them, they backed them to go against the Palestinians in Lebanon. And in 1982, the Kataib did a whole-scale massacre of the Palestinians, butchering thousands of Palestinian civilians in the Palestinian areas of Sabra and Shatila. And this massacre was done with the superintendence of Israel, with the support of Israel. Israel facilitated the massacre. Israel was watching the massacre as it was happening in real time. And Israel wanted this massacre to happen because they wanted to destroy any trace of the Palestinian cause in Lebanon. They wanted the Kataib to rule over Lebanon so that they could use the Kataib as a proxy to serve Israel's interest in Lebanon. And I think that the Israelis want to do the same sort of agenda in their backing of European nationalist movements right now. Because right now, there is a very strong pro-Palestine movement in Europe. And what the Israelis want to do is get these movements gotten rid of. They want to purge the pro-Palestine movement out of Europe. Because if the pro-Palestine movement gets big enough in Europe, it could actually begin to dictate policy in regards to Israel. And they don't want this. The Israelis do not want this. So the Israelis will begin to support far-right movements because those far-right movements also don't like Arabs, they don't like Syrians, and so they can have common ground in that regard with the Israelis. And as I've already said, if the Israelis can get these people to just remain nationalistic and right-wing and hardline enough to go against Arabs and other minorities other than Jews, but not become so right-wing to the point where they start hailing Hitler, then Israel can use these movements to its benefit. And Israel could use those goyim to advance whatever policy they want Europe to do. I think that this is the whole plan. And the reason why I say this is because one thing I've noticed is that in all of these right-wing movements, you always have Zionists. Not all of them are Zionists. In the AfD, for example, you have people who are clearly Nazis who don't even like Jews. I mean, people like Björn Höcke, who is probably the most famous figurehead in the German Alternative for Deutschland party. He is clearly a Nazi. But still, you have Zionists in the ranks of the AfD. And those people are representing Israel. The Zionists want to use German nationalism to go against the Arabs, the Muslims, the Palestinians, etc. And if they can get these Nazi governments to just butcher these migrants, these Arabs, these Syrians, you could have just a purely white, conservative Europe, right-wing Europe, that would be pro-Israel. This is my theory. I could be wrong, but this is my theory as to why Israel has an interest in these groups. If these nationalists can be just racist and violent enough to the point where if they take power, they can genocide certain people, but not right-wing to the point where they would hate Jews, then Israel can use them as a very effective and dangerous proxy. I can guarantee you that if the Nazis never killed Jews, and that if they only killed Slavic people and blacks and gypsies and people with mental and physical deformities and handicaps, Jews today, not all of them, but you would have Jews today praising Hitler. I guarantee it. If Hitler just killed Russians, if Hitler just killed 30 million Russians, never killed Jews, and if he just killed Poles and a lot of, I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush here, but a lot of Zionists hate Poland. There's a history of tension between Poles and Jews, and a lot of Polish people are very critical of Israel today. But if Hitler just butchered Russians and just butchered Poles and gypsies and blacks and people with deformities and intellectual handicaps, I can guarantee you, you would have right-wing Israelis today praising Adolf Hitler. Guarantee it. Because you talk to a lot of Zionist people today, and they're not too nice when it comes to Russians and Poles. They don't necessarily like Polish people. They see Polish people as not friends of Israel. I remember years ago talking to this Zionist guy. He was a Zionist activist. I'm not going to give names. And he told me, he said, oh, well, Poland's no friend of Israel. In fact, before the Holocaust took place, the Nazis actually had a policy where they were actually trying to help the Zionist cause. Yes, no joke. You can look this up. Now, they weren't doing this because they loved Jews. They were doing this because they wanted to purge Germany of Jews. But the initial program against the Jews by the Nazi government was to actually aid the Zionist cause. And they were actually sending Jews to Palestine. Yeah, they were actually sending Jews to Palestine. You can look this up. This was way before the Holocaust. And so if Hitler had just done that, and he had just slaughtered millions, tens of millions of Russians and Poles and some other minorities, Serbs, gypsies, blacks, would we even be talking about Hitler as much as we have done in these last recent decades? No, we wouldn't be. I mean, that's just a sad reality. We would not be. And today, we would be having Likudists and other Israeli right-wingers praising Adolf Hitler today. I guarantee it. The only reason why right-wing Zionists and Israelis bash Adolf Hitler is because he killed Jews. It's not because he killed Poles. It's not because he killed Russians. It's not because he butchered hundreds of thousands of Serbs or gypsies or blacks. It's because he killed Jews. In other words, he killed the wrong Semites in the eyes of these right-wing hardliners in Israel. He killed the wrong Semites. He killed the Jews. He should have killed the other part of the Semitic family, the Arabs. This is just a sad reality. So the Israelis, they see these hardline right-wing European nationalists, you know, the flag wavers, the German far right, the French far right, the Swedish far right. They see all these right-wing groups and they think, hey, we can use these people. We can use this group of people. History does not exactly repeat, but it does rhyme, just as the Nazis and the Zionists worked together, and the Nazis aided the Zionist cause and then turned on the Jews. The nationalists are working with Zionists right now, but eventually the nationalist movement in Germany and in other parts of Europe will turn on the Jews. yes, you do have German nationalists who are pro-Israel, but at the same time, there are a lot of German nationalists who are true German nationalists. They are for Deutschland and not for Israel. They are for Deutschland über alles and not Israel über alles. And these nationalists have a Nazi streak to them. They will see Hitler as a hero. And this revival of this type of nationalism is growing. And it is growing with a very intense rage. And soon, these nationalists will look at the Zionists around them and they will say, wait a second, you guys aren't for Germany, you guys aren't for Deutschland, you guys are for Israel. And Israel is a foreign Semitic entity that has nothing to do with Germany. So who do you guys really represent? Whose interests are you actually for? Whose interest are you actually representing here? And the Hitlerite nationalists will turn on the Zionistic nationalists. This is my prediction. In fact, there was a whole meeting where European right-wing leaders or European right-wing political figureheads actually went to Israel. What were they doing there? The Israelis wanted them there to make sure that those right-wing European figureheads are going to be friends of Israel. And Israel wants to make sure that these people just remain far right enough to where they're going to want to get rid of the same people that the Israelis don't like, Arabs, Muslims, etc. But that they're not going to become right-wing to the point where they're going to go full-on Kanye West Hitler. Now, I think what's eventually going to happen is this whole plan is going to backfire on the Israelis. Because what's currently happening is a lot of right-wingers have been saying things like, the quote-unquote Jews are behind the whole migrant crisis that's been going on in Europe since 2014, 2015. And more right-wingers, conservatives, are subscribing to this view. And as their numbers grow, as their ranks begin to continue to swell, the conservative movement is going to become more and more critical of Israel, anti-Israel. The right-wing movement in the Western world is going to continue to be anti-Israel. This really terrifies the Israelis because the Israelis do not want to lose the right wing. The liberals are, for the most part, critical of Israel already, so that leaves Israel to really just relying on the right wing in the West. And if Israel loses the right wing, it loses the West. And the Western world would eventually shift against Israel in such a situation. So Israel is really trying to contain these right-wing movements. That's why people like Tommy Robinson are involved in the European right-wing movement. But as I said, as more and more right-wingers begin to blame the Jewish people on the migrant crisis, the more right-wingers are going to be anti-Israel. And this whole thing is eventually going to backfire on Israel. So that's why the Zionists have their hands in all of these different ideological movements. The evangelical crowd, the European right-wing crowd, the American right-wing crowd. You have Zionist activists, Zionist figureheads in all of these movements because they want to make sure that all these movements can be used by Israel to their benefit. That's just the bottom line. All right? All right, guys, I've talked long enough. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.